Hi, this is We Build Stuff, and welcome to the Welded Stump and Axe project. This is a great intro to metalwork project and has some fun options to customize it the way you want. We will be using grinders, lathes, welders, drills, and some hand tools. Please follow along to see the way I built this and find the project procedure and plans in the description. Leave a comment, a like, and we love seeing people subscribe so they can follow and see more of what we build.
Our pipe is painted. We're going to get rid of the paint because we're going to be welding. You could grind it off using a bench grinder, angle grinder, file. If you have access to a sandblaster, you could sandblast the paint off, or you could just buy material that is not painted. I'm going to start by just rounding the edges over so I don't hurt my fingers. Next, to get rid of the paint, I'm going to go back and forth until this whole thing has no more paint on it. Now that all the paint is off, I'm going to go ahead and add a chamfer to one side. The chamfer should be at least, either you can call it a 1/4 inch or probably 3 to 4 millimeters wide. Hold it on a 45-degree angle to the wheel. And don't put a groove in the middle of the wheel. Don't just hold it in one place. Go left and right with it. Start to see getting a bit of an angle there. Now the other way to do this is on the lathe. Use the Allen key, depending on your lathe. I'm going to set mine to 30 degrees for this, retighten it back up. Do the same thing on the back. Set up my cutting bit so it's straight. Now you can see there's a chamfer. This is going to allow us to get deeper penetration when we weld our cap on, or the top, whatever you want to call that part. So we can either try to find a piece of flat bar wide enough to make a cap. That would seem like a waste using something that big. Or we can get some thicker sheet. I'm going to use the plasma cutter to cut out this sheet here. This is about an 1/8 inch thick. I'm going to line it up and just trace out a circle. I'm then going to cut out just a little bigger than the actual pipe. I'm drawing near the edges so I don't waste. If I do it here, I end up wasting a lot here. I want to reuse as much material as I can. On our handheld plasma cutter, I just got to double check that I do have power. I'm going to crank it up to about 26 according to ours. There's a lot of ways you can cut out sheet. Angle grinder with a zip disc, hacksaw, something. Unfortunately, after plasma cutting, You get all this slag and these nasty edges. I want to grind these off smooth. I'm gonna have to do it later anyways. It's easier to do it while it's apart. It's okay that it's not a perfect circle either, because I'm gonna be grinding that down after it's all welded. So I've got my piece. I'm gonna put it with the chamfered edge of that pipe down on there, try to center it, and make sure I have a little bit around each side. By adding the chamfer, it's gonna let me get more weld down inside and penetrate, so that when, if we grind down or whatever, clean up our edges, it's gonna make sure it's really nice and strong. So I'm gonna start just by tacking it in 4 places, 1, 2, 3, 4, to make sure it's flat. If I tack it one time, and the metal shifts a little bit, I need to make sure I press it back down, hammer it, something to make sure there's no gaps going all the way around. I've got my argon CO2 mix gas set to just under 10 liters per minute. And on the front of our machine, I've got it set to 17 volts and about 186 for its wire speed. Now, because this project is mainly about learning different tools, I'm not concerned if your welds look too pretty here. We just want to make sure that the cap doesn't fall off and then there's no gaps in between the cap and the pipe. Mine's nice and tight because you saw I had my hand down on it while I was welding. We're going to go ahead and weld the rest of this. This allows you to practice your 90-degree or fillet welds. Up and down, or circles. Just make sure it penetrates deep inside that chamfer. Even though I think my welds turned out really pretty, we're going to be grinding this down until this whole edge is close to the diameter of the pipe. I'll maybe leave it about 1 millimeter or 1/16 larger than the pipe. It's going to get welded over anyways. But this way, when we weld, we don't get a big line and then a bump when we turn this to look like log or whatever you want to call it. Make sure you're using a grinding disc, not a cutting disc, especially this one. This one's a little broken. Don't use a cutting disc for this part. We're going to be rounding it over. Okay, so you can see that I've got it almost all the way around it. It's okay, it's a little funky. We're going to be welding over those, but I blended it all in together. Don't grind off so much that your whole top falls off. Because I had pretty high heat on my welding, it penetrated enough that you can see that it all welded together, even after being grinded. Now normally you don't want to grind your welds for big projects. However, for this project specifically, we're testing for penetration. And I think there might be one spot right there that it didn't penetrate out of this whole thing. Looking all the way around, you can see that maybe 2 more tiny little spots right there. That's not too bad. This is going to be enough to hold it together for when we go to the lathe. Now we're going to get our piece installed. You don't need all of it out, but just make sure that when you clamp it in, it doesn't wobble all over. As we've been grinding, it might not be a perfect circle anymore. Look at it close. The goal is not to take it out in between each of these steps. Clamp it in. I've got maybe 2 centimeters sticking out. Let's test it for rotation. No wiggle, fantastic. I'm gonna be running this at probably about 600 RPM because it's pretty hard steel now with all this heat applied to it. I don't wanna break any cutting bits. Check our RPM. There, 600 is good. I can then go get my bit here that I use for facing setup. Make sure it's not too high or too low, or you're gonna end up with a little nub in the middle. I usually just bring my bit in there and touch it, bring it backwards, and I'm gonna bring it over just a little bit. Nice and smooth. Our next step, we're going to take our cutting bit, make sure it's nice and sharp, and we're going to go in, out, over, maybe 10 times to create growth rings that you see after you cut a log or a branch or any part of a tree. So I'll pick a spot, I'm going to go in a little bit. Take it out, in a little bit. So you can see there, I've already got 2 rings. I'm going to go ahead and make a couple more. I just go in a little bit until it's deep enough and take it out. That helps give it kind of a cool growth ring effect. So those little pieces I just made are meant to simulate branches that have been cut off from, you know, a trunk or a branch or something. So each of those has some growth rings. These have a hole drilled in it. So I can put those pieces in, weld it from the inside. You don't see welds going around the branch. Then when I start welding the bark around this, I'm gonna kind of go down and maybe kind of go slightly around it. And that should give the simulation of a branch that has been cut off. So now I'm ready to start running beads. Now, I'm not worried about if my beads look fantastic. Bark is meant to look different and ragged depending on the species of the tree. But my main goal for students is to go from the very bottom all the way to the top. Don't go here and then stop and leave a blank part. Go all the way, wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. You can do circles, zigzags. Don't go like giant W's because trees don't look like that, but kind of go in that direction all the way to the top, and then we're going to stop. If you need to take a break, yeah, just continue from where you're going and try to get roughly straight. It's okay to have a little bit of slant to it, but go all the way to the top to help cover any seam that you may have left or anything here at the lid or the cap or whatever you want to call it. I had to quickly tack that together. I was worried that when I was drilling that something was going to fall apart, so I just added a tack on either side. I ended up grinding down a little bit more than I should have. I got decent penetration, but not quite as much as I would have liked. Okay, I'm gonna start running some beads. So for a first sample, it might not be perfectly straight, but I'm gonna go beside it, fill in some gaps, so we can do. This is great practice because you have to run at least 20 beads on here. Now you want to use pliers to be moving stuff. This is going to get hot enough that it's going to burn through your welding glove, wrecks the gloves, and you can burn your fingers. To prevent it from rolling off the table on top of your leg or something, put a piece of metal or a magnet, something on the front and the back so that it doesn't roll around. And then rotate it as you need to. Try alternating your different styles of welds to get different patterns. It'll make it more interesting for yourself. So because this is a practice project, metal art, whatever, I'll have students try pushing or pulling their welds, hold the welding gun on a different angle, and see what kind of different patterns you can get. Can you try to follow a path, or are you just going to try to go straight? This is just about getting students comfortable with using these tools. Now I've gone all the way around. I think I might want to try to fill in a couple of those cracks in between. It's okay if it's big in some areas. Trees don't have to be perfectly round, right? But I think it looks pretty cool with the way that I went around those little stumps in a couple of those spots. I'm gonna try to lower my voltage. Instead of 17, I'm down to 15 here. Let's see how it looks filling in a couple of cracks. So definitely not as nice with that lower voltage. It was splattering a lot more. It was really popping. So I like to weld this a little bit hotter then. But let's try to experiment. I got 2 more I'm gonna fill here. I'm gonna crank the voltage back up. So I think that log actually looks pretty cool. You can see where the nice little parts come out there, where the branches were. So now that my log is done, I wanna build some kind of axe or saw. I think I'm gonna use a little bit of flat bar. We're gonna make some kind of shape up here. Probably cut this off at some point where it looks good. I might even end up using a thicker handle, we'll see. But I'm gonna make the head of it first. Doesn't really matter if this is a practical axe. I just think it might look kind of cool.
Hope you enjoyed this project. We're always adapting and changing things as we learn and build stuff. There are lots of different ways to accomplish this project, so use the tools you have and enjoy creating. Don't forget to subscribe and follow to see more fun projects. Thank you so much for watching.